Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
A movie about bad fish, a stressed and traumatized pilot, and an inflatable co-pilot turned the whole disaster movie genre into one big joke and somehow became one of the most influential comedy films ever made. Well, that was Airplane. Paramount Pictures released it in 1980, and from the outside it looked like every other high-stakes disaster movie of that time. Disaster at 30,000 feet starring Robert Hayes, Julia Haggerty, Lloyd Bridges, Robert Stack, Peter Graves, and Leslie Nielsen, none of whom were actually hired to be funny, and that was the whole point. Now, behind the deadpan one-liners, the background jokes you missed the first 3 times, and the fast punchlines that never stop long enough for you to breathe, Airplane had a production story almost as crazy as the movie itself. And today, we are going to count down 15 weird facts that you did not know about Airplane. And stick around for number 15, because this movie almost never made it to theaters at all. And as you get comfortable in your seat, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button. It helps YouTube know that you enjoy the nostalgia deep dives of your favorite movies. Alright, fasten your seatbelts. Let's get ready for takeoff. Number 1. The casting gamble that made Airplane work. Now, when the Airplane script reached Paramount, studio executives had a very clear idea for Ted Stryker. They wanted a big comedy star like Chevy Chase or Bill Murray, someone the audience already knew was funny. But Zaz said absolutely not. The search for Stryker led to some very surprising auditions. Bruce Jenner reportedly read for the role, but the directors wanted someone with a more slightly confused, awkward feeling that did not match the usual heroic pilot image the studio expected. David Letterman also did a screen test for the role. Zaz liked him enough to call him back for a second audition, but Letterman decided the role was not right for him. Even famous singer Barry Manilow was strongly supported by the studio, but Zaz did not want him. According to production stories, and a helpful Paramount executive stepped in, called Manilow directly, and explained just how inexperienced the directing team was, basically convincing him to step away from the role on Zaz's behalf. And then they found Robert Hayes. He was serious, a little nervous, and able to say completely silly lines with full confidence. And to make it even better, he was actually a licensed pilot. That role belonged to him.
Well, I flew single-engine fighters in the Air Force, but this plane has 4 engines. It's an entirely different kind of flying.
The search for Elaine also had its own problems. Sigourney Weaver, who had just become famous from Alien, reportedly thought about the role, but she later passed on it, possibly because she was uncomfortable with some of the script's more crude jokes. Shelley Long also considered the part before Julia Haggerty came in and immediately impressed everyone in the room. After just one audition, with no hesitation, she got the role locked. The list of almost cast actors for Airplane looks like the most surprising casting list ever made. Number 2, the movie they accidentally recorded. Now, one of the funniest movies ever made exists because someone forgot to turn off the VCR. But that is not just a joke setup. That is the real origin story. Jim Abrahams and Jerry and David Zucker, also known as Zed AZ, had a habit they called signing for fish, which meant leaving a VCR running overnight to record whatever strange late-night TV shows came on, and then using that footage for parody ideas in their stage show, Kentucky Fried Theater. One night, the tape recorded a very serious 1957 disaster film called 0 Hour. They could not stop laughing. The story was completely serious. A stressed war veteran must land a passenger plane after the crew gets sick from food poisoning. Every line was said with full seriousness. Every dramatic moment felt like it needed a joke. So the trio did something truly unusual. They used the structure of 0 Hour as a base and started building comedy directly into it. That is why watching both films back-to-back feels so strange. The main character's name, Ted Stryker, S-T-R-Y-K-R, becomes Ted Stryker, S-T-R-I-K-E-R. The food poisoning problem turns into Airplane's famous bad fish situation. Even lines like sluggish like a wet sponge are inspired by 0 Hour's original dialogue.
Sluggish, like a wet sponge.
Sluggish, like a wet sponge.
With the jokes turned all the way up, and then it became clear this was not just a parody anymore, this was basically a remake. And in Hollywood, that is the kind of sentence that can quickly lead to legal trouble. So the trio went to the owners of 0 Hour and actually bought the official remake rights for $2,500. That payment acted like a legal shield. Characters, settings, dialogue, everything became legally theirs to use. Airplane went on to make over $171 million worldwide and completely change comedy films. That $2,500 might be the best deal ever made in Hollywood history. Number 3, the Maestro of Mischief. Now, Leslie Nielsen spent 30 years being taken seriously before he discovered the fart machine, and after that, he never looked back. The device was a small handheld noisemaker. The exact origin is a bit unclear, with different stories ranging from an Oklahoma craftsman to something provided by the Paramount prop department. What is not unclear is what Nielsen did with it. On the set of Airplane, he would use it in the middle of normal conversations and keep talking like nothing happened, which made the cast and crew struggle to stay serious. Robert Hayes said Nielsen played it like a true maestro. Nielsen also did not keep the fun to himself and eventually started selling the devices to crew members for $7 each. It got so out of control that the assistant director eventually banned them from the set. But Nielsen ignored that rule in a way only a man with a prank device could, by taking it everywhere anyway. Press events, interviews, dinner parties, elevators. He reportedly even used it at the White House on a first-class flight, and almost every talk show he appeared on. His style was always the same. Completely straight face, no reaction, full commitment.
Although I will do almost anything I can for a laugh.
The joke became inseparable from his legacy right up to the very end. Nielsen's tombstone reads simply, "Let her rip." He spent the next 30 years making sure nobody could take him seriously, and he left specific instructions to ensure it stayed that way. Number 4, the heckle that came straight from real life. Now, the moment a 10-year-old passenger casually roasts Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in the cockpit might be the most unexpected trash talk in movie history. But it was not random. By 1979, Kareem was already one of the greatest basketball players alive. Multiple MVP awards and a dominant center for the Lakers. But critics sometimes said he eased up a bit during the regular season and did not always give full effort on defense. So when Joey leans forward and delivers the line, "My dad says you don't work hard enough on defense and that you don't really try except during the playoffs."
I think you're the greatest, but my dad says you don't work hard enough on defense.
The joke lands really hard because it echoes exactly the kind of criticism Kareem sometimes heard from sports media. But Kareem's comeback, "Tell your old man to drag Walton and Lanier up and down the court for 48 minutes, was not random either. Bill Walton and Bob Lanier were two of the most physically demanding centers in the league. This scene gave Kareem something he rarely got in public: the final word. According to some later accounts, the role was originally meant for one of my favorite athletes of all time, Pete Rose. But filming clashed with the 1979 MLB season, so the co-pilot role ended up going to the 7'2" Lakers center instead of Charlie Hustle. And Kareem's salary negotiation itself is part of Hollywood's story. Zaz offered him $30,000, and then his agent came back asking for $35,000. The reason was very specific. That was the exact price of an Oriental rug Kareem wanted to buy. Not something to walk on, but an art piece. Zaz thought it might be a creative bargaining tactic, but they agreed, half amused. A few weeks later, a Time magazine article even showed a photo of Kareem standing in front of the rug he had already bought with that money. He got the role, he got the rug, and he got the last word on defense. Not a bad day's work for a co-pilot. Number 5, the joke, a minute blueprint. Film historians often estimate that Airplane packed around 260 jokes into its 88-minute runtime. That is about 3 jokes per minute, which means Zaz had a very precise, almost engineering-like approach. They were not just aiming for funny, they wanted non-stop comedy. Their idea was simple: keep the audience laughing so constantly that they do not even get time to think about how crazy the story actually is. And the method was layering. While one joke is happening in the foreground, something ridiculous is already going on in the background. Signs, visual jokes, and passengers doing strange things that the characters never react to. If you miss one joke, another one is already happening right away. The movie was built to reward repeat viewing, with new details showing up every time you watch it. It almost forces a second viewing and then a third, because there is always something you did not notice before. And some of the smartest jokes are not even obvious on screen. For example, throughout the entire film, the plane shown on screen looks like a modern jetliner for its time, but...
You see us now? You should be able to see the field now.
The sound that you hear is not a jet engine at all. It is actually the steady chugging sound of a propeller aircraft. And that sound was taken directly from 0 Hour. It is a hidden callback to the movie's origin story, built into every single flying scene. So your eyes see a modern jet, but your ears are still hearing something from the 1950s. It is the kind of detail most viewers never notice. Our brains automatically assume we are hearing jet engine sounds whenever we see a plane on screen. But aviation fans eventually picked it up, and film historians pointed it out later too. And once you notice it, you cannot ignore it anymore. It becomes a perfect hidden joke in Airplane. quietly running underneath the whole movie without most people ever realizing it. Number 6, the Broadway legend in a combat helmet. So the soldier in the hospital bed who suddenly breaks into a full Broadway song, that is not an impersonator. That is the real person. The setup is very ZZ style. Ted Stryker walks through a military ward and a doctor leans over to explain the patient in the corner. Severe shell shock. He thinks he is Ethel Merman.
Severe shell shock. Thinks he's Ethel Merman.
And then Ethel Merman sits up in bed and proves him right. The real Ethel Merman, one of the most powerful voices in Broadway history, a performer critics said could fill a theater even before microphones were standard, immediately belts out, "Everything's coming up roses" from Gypsy. And the scene ends in the only way it really could. An orderly rushes in and sedates her right in the middle of the song. The joke works on 2 levels at once. First, a soldier who believes he is a Broadway star. And then the camera pulls back and reveals the punchline. He actually is. The gag only works because Merman agreed to play it completely straight, which, given her reputation for commitment, was never really in doubt. It is also worth noting that this was Merman's final film role. She passed away in 1984. Indian Airplane became her last on-screen appearance. A Broadway legend in a military hospital ward, delivering a full show-stopping performance in uniform, then getting knocked out mid-note. In a movie built on absurdity, it somehow fits perfectly. Number 7, play it like it's not a comedy. The most important rule on the set of Airplane was also the strangest one. Nobody was allowed to act like they were in a comedy. Zucker, Abrahams, and Zucker believed the jokes would fall apart the moment an actor even slightly winked at the audience. So they gave every cast member one clear instruction: play every scene like you are in a serious, high-stakes thriller. And the cast eventually understood that direction. Robert Stack originally played his role in a very flat, monotone way, completely missing the tone that Zaz needed.
You can't come straight in. You got enough fuel left for 2 hours of flying.
Their solution was a little unusual. They showed him a tape of comedian John Biner doing an impression of Robert Stack. What they wanted was Biner doing Stack. 3 layers of deadpan seriousness, all pointing in the same direction. Stack. And he understood it right away. Lloyd Bridges watched his character fall apart from cigarettes to alcohol to sniffing glue, all without breaking character once. Peter Graves reportedly called the script the most disgusting piece of trash he had ever read and almost quit. But Zaz reassured him that his more uncomfortable lines would be explained later in a scene he was not in. That scene never existed, and they never told him that. For the role of Dr. Rumack, the part Leslie Nielsen would later make famous, Zaz first approached Vincent Price, Christopher Lee, and Jack Webb. All respected actors, and all of them turned it down. Vincent Price later said refusing it was one of his biggest career regrets. The secret of Airplane was always simple. The actors believed every word they said, and that is exactly what made it so funny. Number 8, the composer who played it deadpan. The idea of playing everything straight did not just apply to the actors. For the music, Zaz hired Elmer Bernstein, the man behind the legendary soundtracks for The Magnificent Seven and To Kill a Mockingbird, and gave him a very specific brief. Not an epic score like his past work, but something that felt like a low-budget B-movie. Overdone, cheesy, and a little too dramatic, like a disaster film that takes itself just a little too seriously. Now, Bernstein had actually done this before. 2 years earlier, director John Landis asked him to do the same kind of approach for Animal House, playing the comedy completely straight, as if the chaotic college fraternity were actual heroes. It worked so well that it helped move Bernstein deeper into comedy films entirely. By the time Airplane came along, he already understood the method, so he went all in again. Lush strings, dramatic bass, and ominous chords pulled straight from a disaster movie playbook. Every tense musical cue is designed to make the audience feel real danger, right up until the punchline arrives and completely flips the moment. Think about that for a second. The music is telling you this is serious, while the screen is showing you a rubber autopilot. And somehow both things feel true at the same time. That's part of the hidden genius of Airplane. The joke is not just what you see, it's what you hear. And Bernstein never once breaks that illusion. If you're enjoying this countdown, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Number 9, the June Cleaver Jive Translator. After Leave It to Beaver ended in 1963, Barbara Billingsley found herself typecast in a way that is almost impossible to escape. The image was fully locked in. Sweet, proper pearls, perfect grammar. And once that image stuck, acting roles became much harder to get. She went 17 years with barely any credits. Then Airplane came along with one of the strangest casting ideas in comedy. Inspired by the rhythm and slang of movies like the 1971 hit Shaft, Zaz created a scene where two passengers speak in heavy jive slang, and someone has to translate it for everyone else on the plane. The first version did not work. Actors Al White and Norman Alexander Gibbs read it and said the same thing. The slang felt fake. Not funny fake, just wrong. So Zaz did something unusual for directors. They handed the scene over to them completely. White and Gibbs studied African-American vernacular and rebuilt the dialogue themselves, keeping it exaggerated but still believable enough to work as comedy. But then they needed a translator, and the joke only works if that person is extremely clean-cut and wholesome. They first considered Harriet Nelson, equally wholesome, equally perfect, but she passed. That left Barbara Billingsley. Billingsley read the script, and her only description for dialogue was "talks jive." She called it the craziest script I've ever read and signed on immediately. White and Gibbs even coached her personally on rhythm and delivery. The result became comedy history. Watching America's most proper TV mom calmly translate lines like "just hang loose blood" completely broke audiences in test screening.
Just hang loose, blood. She's gonna catch up on the rebound on the med side.
The cameo revived everything. After years of limited roles, she was back on talk shows, getting fan mail again, and taking on new projects. Billingsley even said it herself. "It started my whole career again." It turns out that all it took to break the June Cleaver image was one flight and a crash course in jive. Number 10, the joke that needed the wrong voices. Now, the airplane announcer gag in Airplane starts quietly. Two calm voices over a PA system repeating the same familiar warning. The white zone is for loading and unloading only.
The white zone is for immediate loading and unloading of passengers only.
Now, at first, it sounds exactly like every airport announcement you've ever ignored before the gate number even registers. But then something unusual happens. The announcers start arguing. The calm, professional tone never changes, but the conversation slowly turns into a full-blown personal disagreement. It is still delivered in the same neutral voice, normally used for baggage claim updates. There is no shouting, no obvious punchlines, just two voices slowly breaking down over a public address system, while everything around them continues normally. And just when you think it cannot go any further, it suddenly shifts into deeply personal, almost domestic territory that has nothing at all to do with airport instructions. And the clever casting detail is that Zazie could not find professional voice actors who sounded natural enough. So they hired a real-life married couple who actually recorded public address announcements for airports like LAX at the time. The couple arguing on the intercom were, in real life, actually married. The humor is not really in what they are saying, but how they are saying it. That flat, emotionless delivery matches an airport so perfectly that the contrast does all the work. And it is the kind of joke that gets funnier every time you hear an airport announcement afterward. You will never hear "the white zone is for loading and unloading only" the same way again. Number 11, the "prove you're funny" deadline. Now, when the Airplane script reached Paramount, the studio liked what they read, but they were nervous about one thing: who actually wanted to direct it. Zaz had already written the Kentucky Fried Movie, but John Landis had directed it. This time, the trio wanted to direct themselves, even though they had never directed a feature film before. They got an unexpected advantage from chaos elsewhere on the studio lot. Paramount was so focused on managing the huge budget of Star Trek, the motion picture that a $3.5 million comedy about bad fish barely got attention. Still, the deal came with a condition. Paramount insisted on placing veteran producer Howard W. Koch as an executive overseer, with a formal clause that Zazie could be fired after 2 weeks if the footage was not working. Thus, Zazie agreed. They were basically learning how to run a major film set in real time, handling actors, crews, union rules, and a script full of rapid-fire jokes that only worked if played completely straight. Then the studio started seeing the footage. Dead serious actors delivering absurd lines, tight, precise timing. A style of comedy that did not look like anything else in theaters at the time. And suddenly, nobody was talking about replacing anyone anymore. 3 first-time directors from Wisconsin walked into that 2-week window with everything to prove and kept their jobs.
I think after years of telling people this is going to be a hit, then when it was a hit,
all they needed was a little bit of runway to take off. Number 12. The Directors Guild didn't want 3 directors. Now, Paramount was not the only problem Zaz had to face, because the Directors Guild of America was also a major issue. In Hollywood, directing credits are usually very strictly controlled, and the Guild normally allows only 1 director per film. That immediately created a problem for Zaz, because they worked as a team on everything: writing, jokes, timing, and every creative decision. Splitting them up did not make sense because they functioned like one unit. So they even tried to submit a shared fake name, Abrahams and Zuckers, as if all three were one person, but the guild rejected it. For a while, the plan was even to credit only Jerry Zucker as the director.
Hi, I'm Jerry Zucker, and I was one of the guys that made Airplane.
With David and Jim quietly running things behind closed doors. Then the guild's executive board eventually granted a formal waiver, and the whole workaround became unnecessary. When Airplane hit theaters, the directing credit appeared exactly the way the team always worked. Directed by Abrahams, Zucker, and Zucker. It was a rare approval for a directing setup the industry was not really comfortable with, and it quietly helped normalize the idea of collaborative directing teams. And if you think about it, later groups like the Coen brothers and other directing partnerships followed the same path in the years after. Three guys who refused to take turns ended up changing how Hollywood defines a single director. Number 13. The bean dip explosion that you did not notice. Now, the man overseeing one of the messiest gags in Airplane had just a year earlier been running the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. Let that sink in. Howard W. Koch, executive producer and former Academy president from 1977 to 1979, was in charge when the effects team built an air-powered mortar loaded with real bean dip for the scene. The reason was simple. It had exactly the right thick, chunky texture to realistically blast across the room and stick to anything it hit. According to behind-the-scenes commentary from the DVD, the first take did not go as planned. Instead of hitting the intended target, the mortar fired directly into Steven Stucker, the wildly chaotic control tower messenger.
It's a big, pretty white plane with red stripes and curtains in the window and wheels, and it looks like a big Tylenol.
Which caught him completely off guard and covered him in bean dip. His reaction, by all accounts, was not acting. They cleaned up the set, they cleaned up the actor, and then reset the scene. The next take worked exactly as planned. The man who had spent 2 years presiding over Hollywood's most prestigious organization had personally overseen the creation of a gag where something messy gets launched through the air, only for it to end up hitting one of his own cast members during rehearsal. And somehow, that's the kind of behind-the-scenes chaos that makes Airplane feel even funnier in hindsight. Number 14, the 35-day comedy sprint. The entire production of Airplane, wrapped in just 35 days. Principal photography began on June 20th, 1979, mostly on sound stages at Culver City Studios. Zaz ran the set with intense focus and precision, finishing on schedule and within a $3.5 million budget. But the real challenge was not filming it. It was what came out of it. The rough cut was about 115 minutes long, nearly half an hour longer than the version audiences eventually saw. It included extra subplots and experimental jokes that did not really land. One fully filmed scene even featured Jose Feliciano as a blind Air Florida pilot. And early test audiences responded with almost complete silence. But in a comedy built entirely on rapid-fire jokes, silence is not an option. So Zaz did something unusual that most studios would never allow today. They took the film out to college campuses and theaters and let audiences guide the editing process. Every screening became a live experiment. They watched the audience instead of the screen. If a joke got a big laugh, it stayed. If the room went quiet, it was cut. No committees, no executive notes, just real reactions in real time deciding what worked. In total, 27 minutes were removed. What remained was a tight, fast 88-minute comedy, where the next joke arrives before you finish laughing at the last one. That rhythm did not come from a traditional editing room. It came from audiences across America unknowingly shaping the film themselves. 35 days to shoot it, a road trip to fix it, and one of the most perfectly paced comedies ever made. Number 15, when Hollywood tried to ground Airplane. By 1980, Universal Pictures had spent most of the decade building a disaster movie empire. Airport 1975, Airport 77, and The Concorde. Airport 79. 4 films, 1 franchise, 1 brand. So when Paramount announced a comedy called Airplane, a direct parody of everything Universal had built, things got complicated very quickly. During pre-production, Universal filed a formal complaint with the MPAA, arguing that the title and concept were too close to their airport franchise. The arbitration board ruled in Universal's favor, which meant that internationally, the film could not even be called Airplane in some markets. So audiences in the UK, Australia, and several other countries saw it under the title Flying High. That is why older international posters sometimes do not even show the word airplane at all. And the legal pressure did not stop there. It even affected casting. Zaz originally wanted Helen Reddy, the singing nun from Airport 1975, as part of the joke.
Tell me who will never let you down.
To reprise the same role as a direct parody, but Universal said absolutely not. The part went to Maureen McGovern instead, which ended up being an even sharper joke. McGovern had sung theme songs for the Poseidon Adventure and the Towering Inferno. So, in a way, they replaced one disaster movie nun with a singer who had basically been performing over disaster movies for years. When Airplane expanded wide on January 2nd, 1980, it became an instant massive hit. Universal quietly dropped the dispute. Suing the most successful comedy of the year would have made them look exactly like the humorless villain the film was already mocking. In the end, the movie delivered a kind of comedy so precise, so relentless, and so absurd that even Hollywood's legal systems could not slow it down. Like Airplane set a new standard for parody that still holds up today. 45 years later, it is still the same flight everyone is trying to catch. And there you have it. 15 weird facts about the hit movie Airplane. A parody of disaster films starring serious actors delivering ridiculous dialogue with complete sincerity. And audiences got it right away. Which fact surprised you the most? Drop it in the comments, and before we deplane, make sure to ring that bell. Until next time.